Welcome back, Marist sports fans, to another MBC Sports Podcast. This week focusing mainly on Marist's semifinal football matchup against Cartersville. I'm Andrew Sellover.
And I'm Connell Scruggs.
As for Marist girls basketball, they lost to North Cobb 58-39 in the Woodstock Holiday Tournament after a 2-0 start to their season. The boys haven't played since their win over Northview a few weeks ago and are currently 2-1. Both teams take on Pinecrest this week.
And as for cross country, they travel to NXR, which is the Southeast Regional for cross country, which you can qualify for nationals from, which is why they went there, even though the state qualification and competition's over. Both teams were missing their number 2 runners. Leaf Anderson finished 9th and was one spot away from automatically qualifying for nationals. And Kathleen Maley finished 26th. Great way to end their postseason. Fantastic year for cross country.
Yeah, and it was a really tough race for the Marist runners. As you said, missing their number 2 runners, both the boys and girls. And it was a very cold day up in North Carolina. It was very muddy, bad conditions for a cross-country race.
As for the swim and dive team, they've been practicing hard following their McCallie meet, and the wrestlers are going to have a meet against Tucker and Druid Hills this week.
Now we'll move into Georgia High School State football rankings. This week, Colquitt County remains number 1, and they actually take on Archer at home in the 7A semifinals.
And number 2 spot, we have Lee County. They're going to take on Lanier at home, and that's in the 6A bracket.
At number 3 is Archer, and they take on Colquitt County, as I said. That is an away game against the number 1 team in Georgia who has dominated 7A this year, so that's a tough matchup for the number 3 ranked Archer.
And then at 4, we have Lowndes, and they're taking on Milton, but Milton is actually not hosting because their stadium's not big enough, so that game's actually going to be at the Denmark Stadium, which is pretty odd, considering Denmark is a 4A school. Milton's a 7A school, and so yeah, they're going to travel there.
That's right. You would think that Milton would be hosting. They are listed as the home team, but it is at Denmark. They didn't want to move to an away game at Lowndes, because that would obviously take away a lot of home field advantage, give a lot of advantage to Lowndes. At number 5 is Warner Robins. They're hosting Rome in a rematch of last year's 5A state championship, which Rome dominated.
And Cartersville, we're going to talk about them later. They're in the 4A sector. Same with BT. And we're going to go down to number 9, who, as we discussed earlier, they're going to play Lowndes, but at Denmark.
And number 10 is Rome. They travel to Warner Robins, as I said, in the 5A state semifinals. As we move down to Cedar Grove, 11 and 12, Grayson, North Gwinnett are both out of the 7A playoffs. 13 is Cedar Grove. They host Pierce County in 3A. They are actually the only team below 4A that is in the top 20 in the state of Georgia. And now, as we move down, 14, 15, 16, none of which are in the state playoffs anymore. Marist and Troup County at 17 and 18, Connell. Both those teams in the 4A semifinals. And 19 and 20, Walton and Mary Persons. Mary Persons eliminated last week by Marist in a close 10-7 game. So now we'll look at the bracket for the 4A Final Four semifinals. Winners go to the Benz.
Yep. That's going to be an exciting game there, whoever ends up there. And as you can see, Marist beat Mary Persons 10-7 in an exciting game, scoring 10 points in the 4th quarter to come back and win. That was a fantastic game for Marist's defense and their offense in the last quarter.
That's right. Mary Persons came in scoring about 50 points a game, just under that. They had scored as many as like 65 in a game this year. And all the analysts were saying that the Mary Persons offense would be slowed down significantly from their season averages by the Marist defense, but none of them expected this much. They were saying maybe like 15, 20, around that range they were thinking Marist defense would give up. Marist defense gives up 7. and only allowed a few drives down in the Marist half, one of which resulted in a Mary Persons fumble, so that takeaway was huge. But they really didn't allow that many yards in that game. And your other matchup is Blessed Trinity and Troup County. So if you look at it, it's two teams from Region 7, Blessed Trinity and Marist, and two teams from Region 5, Cartersville and Troup. So that shows you that these teams are playing in maybe the two best regions in 4A. Shows you how it's not always evenly balanced regions in GHSA.
Mm-hmm. And if we take a look at the Final Four, we have a potential of being another Marist BT rematch in the state championship, which would be absolutely crazy because both teams, as you discussed earlier, are in the same region. So that just shows how overpowered Region 7 is.
And as we talked about, the state championship, whichever two teams prevail in those two matchups, will be at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, but there could be a potential conflict there. Similar to last year. Last year, of course, the snow out in what was supposed to be a Marist versus Blessed Trinity Saturday game in a state championship at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Then some scheduling difficulties resulted in a game at Marist for the state championship, which didn't end too well, as we all know. But this year, Atlanta United, whose home is Mercedes-Benz Stadium, one win away, or actually one good result, they don't even have to win, from making it into the MLS Cup Final. And if they made the MLS Cup Final, they would be hosting that Saturday of when the state championships are scheduled.
Yep.
The GHSA and Mercedes-Benz have already talked about this. They have said that if those that conflict were to happen, they would move all state championships, the Friday and Saturday matchups, to the following Tuesday and Wednesday. But the teams would still get to play at Mercedes-Benz, which is exciting for them.
Yeah, and I think whatever the 4A result is, I think they would be playing Wednesday. If I'm
Wednesday at 4:30.
Yeah.
Or if Atlanta United doesn't make it to the MLS Cup, it would be Saturday at 4:30. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Marist does need to win.
Still opponent to play against.
That's
Cartersville.
right. Don't overlook Cartersville. You got to get through this Friday to make it to the state championship. So now we'll move into a pregame for that game, Marist versus Cartersville in the GHSA 4A semifinal.
So Cartersville ranks 7th in the state. Marist ranks 17th. This is the second time Marist has made it into the top 20 this year. Earlier, before they played Pius. And Cartersville is ranked as the number 1 team in 4A, hopping BT. So this is going to be a very challenging game for Marist. It's been a gauntlet pretty much all playoff except for the first game against Heritage, playing St. Pius, Mary Persons, and now Cartersville all away. And let's see if they can do a trifecta on 3 tough teams away.
That's right. As you said, a gauntlet. Marist, the hard teams just keep coming as expected. St. Pius away in the second round. St. Pius the favorite as they won the regular season game 17-0 at Marist. Marist goes in there, plays well, gets a big win over St. Pius 24-8. Then again over the Thanksgiving holiday break, Marist traveling to Mary Persons as an underdog, probably 10 to 14 point underdog, and they get a big win 10-7 on a late Brendan Farrell field goal. And now they will have to travel to Cartersville this Friday and be underdogs again.
Yeah, and that win was mainly because of their defensive performance. A fantastic defensive performance for Marist, only allowing 121 yards rushing, 74 yards passing, and 1 touchdown against a stacked Mary Persons offense who has been putting up way more than 400 yards per game and about 40 points per game in the regular season. They just shut him down. Had an interception by Josh Moore. I think that's his 10th of this season, and a fumble recovered. So just a great performance by Mary Persons. Let's see if they can keep that performance going and keep their role going into this Cartersville game.
Right, and the Marist defense only allowed about, I would say, 2 really good drives by for Mary Persons. It was the 1 touchdown drive early in the third quarter, and also one earlier where they drove to around the Marist 30 and then lost the ball on a fumble. So Marist defense did a good job of getting those 2 takeaways, as you said, the 1 fumble and the interception by Josh Moore. And towards the end of the game, it got a little scary when Josh Hartage for Mary Persons on the final drive after the Brendan Farrell field goal threw a deep pass from around his own 30, and it was about a minute or so left. And actually, the Marist defense allowed a receiver to get wide open, it was about a 40, 50-yard pass, went right into the receiver's hands, and he dropped it, Connell. He would have been tackled, most likely, by Kyle Hamilton once he caught it, but it would have given them field position around our 20. With about a minute left, they could have gone in for a touchdown and won the game. So it was some scary moments there. But besides that one play at the end of the game, they really shut down that Mary Persons offense. A few key sacks, one by Derek McDonald, set up Mary Persons about 4th and 30, which they were unable to convert. Around 30 seconds left in the game, and Marist obviously was able to run the clock out from there.
And as for the Marist offense, it was a pretty average performance, 34 passing yards on 3 for 9 completion percentage, 161 rushing yards, and 195 total yards. So we matched them in terms of offensive production. But the main problem I see here is we're 3 for 13 on third downs in that game. You got to be able to convert a bit more of your third downs to have a good chance against this powerful Cartersville team. And we were 1 for 4 on fourth down. So going on fourth down, a considerable amount. We scored 10 points. So pretty average performance. The offense is really going to need to show up against this Cartersville team, who's actually has a pretty good defense, only allowing about 7 points per game, but not really sure about the offenses they played against.
That's right. And also in that game, the Marist offense, the one thing they have been doing well is adjusting. So second half adjustments have been really key against Pius and against Mary Persons. Against St. Pius, what was it at halftime?
Was it 16-8? I'm not sure.
I think it was 16 to maybe 7, but 16 to 8. It was a close game at halftime, and then Marist made some key offensive and defensive adjustments and pulled away in the second half. Against Mary Persons, Marist had one good drive in the first half, and it ended in no good drives in the first half. And in the second half, they really got the offense going. I don't know what they did at halftime, but it really worked. They had a few really good drives in the third and fourth quarters. In the third quarter, they had a drive which got all the way into Mary Persons territory, down to about the 30, resulted in a Connor Sigelski fumble, unfortunately. But then after that, they had 2 drives down, one resulting in the touchdown and one ending around the 2-yard line, resulting in the field goal to win the game. But in the first half, it was only one drive where Brendan Farrell missed a long field goal. So they barely got into Mary Persons territory in the first half.
Yeah, and we saw this against BT. The defense gave Marist a really good chance to win, playing fantastic against the really star-studded BT offense. And the Marist offense kind of, had a slow game. They, I think, had less than 200 total yards. Were really unable to get anything going. And they're going to really have to have a good game against this talented Cartersville defense to have a chance.
That's right. You'd rather see it both halves than just in the first half, as we saw the past 2 weeks. And as for the Cartersville offense, they beat Baldwin last week, 42-13. It was actually also a slow start for them. They were down 7-0 and then 14-6, I believe, early in that one. Yep. But then they really got it going on offense. They had in that game, they had 57 yards passing and 4 for 7 completion rate for T-Webb, 1 touchdown, 62 yards, 202 rushing yards. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. 202 rushing yards in that game, 5.6 yards per carry, 53-yard long touchdown. 53-yard long rush and 4 touchdowns.
And we see this pretty consistent throughout the year for Cartersville. It's a pretty average game for them. As you can see, 194 passing yards per game, 141 rushing yards per game. Their quarterback, T-Webb, recruited very early on by Louisville, posting a .601 completion percentage, 32 passing touchdowns compared to 29 rushing touchdowns. They have a pretty balanced offense. But one of their impact players, who is a senior, his name is Marcus Gary. He's the main workhorse for them. He has posted fantastic stats all throughout the season, 107.2 rushing yards per game, That's about 5.8 yards per carry on about 16 carries per game. He's had 8 games where he's rushed for 100-plus yards. So really putting out a lot, big numbers for Cartersville.
Yeah, and you saw that those stats for rushing yards against Baldwin, as we talked about, 202 yards rushing, which was a very impressive running performance. It was a less than stellar passing performance compared to their standards, only 57 yards passing, but they did have the 1 touchdown, and they didn't really need the passing game. Baldwin was able to kind of shut it down, but they weren't able to stop the run game. As we said, 202 yards rushing. They just ran all over the Baldwin defense. Marcus Gary in that game, we said 202 yards rushing, 191 yards on 29 carries in that one game.
29 carries in that game. Yeah, they just fed the ball basically to him the entire game. 3 touchdowns and a 53-yard long run for him.
That's right. Only like 2 other handoffs in the game, I think. And the defense for Cartersville allowed 13 points against Baldwin, 1 passing, 1 rushing TD. They also had 2 interceptions and a fumble. So 3 turnovers forced. So that's
taking advantage of them.
That would be key. If Marist cannot turn the ball over, if they can get a few turnovers on defense, that could cause maybe a win against Cartersville.
Yeah, Marist has been able to do that pretty much all season, staying pretty low on the turnovers, maybe 1 or 2 per game, most likely 1 turnover. But that's going to be really important because Cartersville's defense, as I said earlier, only gives up about 7 points per game, so they're going to need to take advantage of every drive they can to have a good chance against this team.
That's right, but we talked about the Cartersville offense, but their defense is good. Marist defense is good. I still wouldn't expect this to be a high-scoring game.
This is not going to be a high-scoring
Another
game.
Defensive battle, as we've seen the past few weeks. Marist allowing 8 points to St. Pius, allowing 0 points in the first half till they put the starters in the first-round matchup. And then last week, obviously, only 7 points against Mary Persons. So I would expect for another defensive battle and Marist's defense to come and show up. It's just going to be, can Marist put up a few points on the board, get a few touchdowns? Maybe they can win the game if they can put up over 14 points against Cartersville.
Yep, it looks to be a fantastic game. But that's all we have for this week. That's going to be the end of the podcast. Make sure to tune in at 7:30. We're going to be broadcasting down in Cartersville.
If you can't make it, obviously tune in.
Yes,
but we would love to have you at the game.
Yep. See if we can have a great environment even at their stadium. But that would be pretty surprising considering how far it is away.
Try to pull out a win against the Cartersville Canes and hopefully take a trip to Mercedes-Benz Stadium for the state championship. Hopefully, if we can pull off a win against Cartersville.
All right. Well, for MBC, I'm Connell Scruggs.
And I'm Andrew Sellover. Have a great week, everybody.